The journey started in 2014 in Azub in Uherský Brod, where I made a short trial round around Czech Republic to Brno and a little bit Austria and back to Uherský Brod. And then in July 2015 I started for my trip from Uherský Brod around Poland, up to the sea, and then to Eastern Germany, back to Czech Republic, back to Uherský Brod, where I went to Azub for some changes. And then I went through Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, down to Greece, around Greece, and then to Crete, a short trip to Santorini, and then to Turkey around the coast, and then a short around northern Cyprus, then crossing Turkey from south to north along the Black Sea, and then to Georgia. There I made a short detour to Armenia for a little bit of holiday, and then I went through Azerbaijan and Iran, and here I made a side trip without a trike a little bit in Iran, and then I went all the way to Mashhad. Then I had to fly to Samarkand and to Tashkent, where my trike arrived by plane as well, but I had to leave the trailer behind, so I had to rebuild a new trailer here in Tashkent at the window frame factory. So with a new trailer I went on from Uzbekistan through Kazakhstan to Kyrgyzstan. In Bishkek I settled my trike. I went for some trip and a hike up to the mountains and back to Bishkek, and that was around 2016, where I left the trike during the winter in Bishkek, went home to Switzerland, came back in spring 2017 with a friend of mine. He came along with me from Kyrgyzstan through Kazakhstan to the Chinese border. There he went back, and I drove further on alone through China, down to the Gobi Desert, and then around Guangzhou, Ningxia, and up to Hohhot, where I had to leave the country for a short time. So I went to Ulaanbaatar in Mongolia, made it a short trip, and back to Hohhot. And then I went with a trike further on to Beijing and on the coast, where I put the trike into a ferry and I went to South Korea. So I drove all the way to South Korea to Busan, and then I shipped the trike to Hong Kong, and in that meantime I went to Taiwan, take a round trip with a train around Taiwan, and then I went to Hong Kong. Yeah, I wanted to go further on with a trike to Southeast Asia. That wasn't possible, so I shipped it to Australia, and in the meantime, as I got the Australia visa, I visited Hainan Island by train, and then as I had the visa, I shipped the trike to Australia, and I went by a plane to Hanoi, made a short trip to the sea and up to the mountain, and then all through Vietnam to Ho Chi Minh City, and then I took a flight via Singapore to Darwin. And then I had to wait for my trike to come, so I went to Kakadu National Park, got the trike there, and in Darwin I rebuilt a new trailer as well, so I had my third trailer. And then I went on my trip first to northern Australia, then to West Australia to Broome, then down to the west coast to Perth, and down to south, and all along the Nullarbor, and up down to Port Lincoln, up and down to Adelaide, In Adelaide, I went out of the country because of visa regulations down to Bali, made a round trip to Bali, came back to Adelaide and went further on with a trike to Melbourne. And there I had to wait for new solar panels, so in the meantime I went to Tasmania, went down to the overland track by foot, and then a friend took me around Tasmania with a road trip, and I went back to Melbourne, packed new solar panels on the trike. Then I went further on up till Sydney, and in Sydney I shipped it to New Zealand, and I went in the meantime to Fiji, just had a brief look around. Then I went down to Auckland, get my trike, and first I went around the Northland loop and then a North Island around Mount Taranaki down to Wellington, and then further on to South Island, and I did some hiking trips in these areas, and further on the east coast down to Christchurch, and then I went a little bit through the mountains down to Invercargill, and then I made some short hikings down on Stewart Island and went back cycling, and then I had to go back to Christchurch, and there it was 2020 March where the lockdown happened and everything was closed, all the border crossings and everything was closed. So I spent half a year in Christchurch and wrote my book and did some other works, so I could do a lot of work anyway. Then in September 2002 I went back home to Switzerland, published a book, then I translated it to English, made an English version of the book, did some shows, and besides, for sure, I was working. And in 2024 in April I went back to New Zealand, to Christchurch, got my trike, shipped it back further on to Vancouver, and in that time I visited some islands in Vanuatu, some islands in Solomon Islands. Then I went further on to Philippines, where I did some short trips here. Then I had short breaks in Hong Kong, where I met some friends, and then I flew all the way to Vancouver in Canada. Then I got my trike here, and I headed off through British Columbia all the way up to Prince George, over the Rocky Mountains, or basically not the Rocky Mountains are ending here, so I was a little bit further up, all to Darwin Creek, and then I had to do a kind of a detour because Jasper National Park was burned down, so I went all around and then went through Banff National Park to Calgary, and then up to Drumheller to Edmonton, where my trike is still there. But I wanted to see something more of the country, so I headed off by train to Winnipeg, further on to Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal and Quebec, and then I met a nice friend here in the Sherbrooke area. And that was the end of my Canada journey in 2024. So this May I will go back to Edmonton and then further on south. Thank you.